Here comes the NotebookLMification of the entire world as Meta releases an open source alternative to the hot Google tool. Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief Headlines Edition, all the daily AI news you need in around 5 minutes. One of the buzziest and most exciting pieces of generative AI software out there right now is Google's NotebookLM. Specifically, of course, people have been super excited about their audio overviews feature, which takes documents of any length and turns them into a 8 to 12 minute podcast-style conversation between two hosts, complete with slightly cringy interactions. Now, NotebookLM has opened up all sorts of new thinking around how people consume information. While nominally it could create some competition in the podcast sphere, where I think it's actually going to play out is people are just going to get used to summarizing big buckets of knowledge as a way of starting to understand things. Anytime students are trying to get their head around a complex topic, it's going to start by dumping in the information into NotebookLM and getting that primer out. Now, recently, NotebookLM has added some of the most requested features, including the ability to better guide the outputs of NotebookLM, which has done nothing but increase people's excitement around the tool. Well, now Meta has released their own version of the tool called, perhaps unsurprisingly, NotebookLama. And very clearly, it focuses on the part of NotebookLM that people are really excited about, this ability to create audio summaries in the form of a back and forth between generated podcast hosts. In terms of what was actually released, this definitely follows Meta's approach to releasing semi-finished open source software that people can start messing around with. This is part of the new way that Meta works. Instead of always releasing polished things, a lot of their value proposition is moving quickly and getting developers tools that they can build on top of. In this case, Meta released the AI workflow for how the process works. The user first prompts an LLM to summarize the documents while retaining contexts. Then it prompts the LLM to turn it into a podcast transcript. Then they prompt the LLM to make this podcast more dramatic. Finally, the audio is generated using a combination of Parler and Suno. One of the most interesting pieces of this is that Meta suggests combining different LLMs to cut down on inference costs. Llama 3.21b is used to produce the summary. Then the company's frontier model, Llama 3.170b, is used to generate the podcast script. And Llama 3.18b is used to punch up the script. So sort of an interesting look at the idea of smaller models as part of a broader AI use case or workflow. In many ways, the release is more of a recipe for making a NotebookLM clone rather than a product itself. And because of that, it's tech agnostic. Users can take this workflow and apply it to whatever models they have access to. Alas, TechCrunch notes that the results so far are a little lackluster, writing, "The results don't sound nearly as good as the NotebookLama samples I've listened to. The voices have a very obviously robotic quality to them and tend to talk over each other at odd points." At this stage, Meta researchers say that the current limitation is the underlying models themselves. Google is using their proprietary model while Meta is leveraging open source models which aren't on the cutting edge. However, they did propose some ways to improve the workflow, writing on their GitHub page, "Another approach of writing the podcast would be having two agents debate the topic of interest and write the podcast outline. Right now, we use a single model to write the podcast outline." Overall, not nearly as finished as Google's product, but still a fascinating look at how easy it will be to spin up competing services from readily available tools. Next up, the latest big numbers from Perplexity. The company says it's now serving 100 million search queries every week. That is almost double the pace from July. In the David versus Goliath battle where Google is Goliath, Google search still serves up around 8 billion queries per day. But Perplexity's niche of AI-powered search is rapidly expanding. In response to an Elon Musk tweet commenting that Google and Microsoft control almost 100% of search volume, Perplexity CEO Aravind Srinivas responded, "This will change in the next 3 years." It's also pretty incredible to see the pace at which the team is executing. They expect to have an AI shopping experience ready for Black Friday for Pro subscribers, and early adopters that churned out of the product are noticing a big improvement when they come back. Andrew Gao, a Stanford student, tweeted, "I haven't tweeted about Perplexity mainly because I wasn't that impressed with the technology. It seemed to be just taking my search query, Googling it, and then summarizing the results. I decided to give it another try yesterday since they announced new reasoning. I was really impressed. I think my searches capture the importance of reasoning in research. Old Perplexity was basically a glorified summarize. New Perplexity can actually do helpful research that saves me time. A query such as the one in the screenshots naturally requires several branching steps. You can't just Google the query and read the top articles because there is no article about it." Lastly today, one from the world of AI and geopolitics. TSMC has cut supply to a client after they were found to be funneling chips to Huawei. 2 weeks ago, news broke that TSMC chips were showing up in Huawei hardware in an apparent breach of export controls. Throttling chip supply to the Chinese firm has been a national security priority in the US since 2020. The news triggered internal investigations and a rumor of a US government probe. It's now revealed that the Huawei supply was traced to a single customer. On Thursday, Taiwan's economic ministry said that they had been informed, but the customer had not been identified. They added, "There was already an interaction and a contractual partnership in place, so it's an old client." The firm said that they had provided detailed reports to TSMC in order to prove that they have no links to Huawei. For their part, TSMC released a statement which said, "TSMC is a law-abiding company, and we are committed to complying with all applicable rules and regulations, including applicable export controls. We proactively communicated with the U.S. Commerce Department regarding the matter in the report. We are not aware of TSMC being the subject of any investigation at this time." Still, this is being treated extremely seriously by some in Washington. Republican Representative John Moolenaar, chairman of the House China Select Committee, said on Wednesday that the reports, quote, represented a catastrophic failure of U.S. export control policy. He called for immediate answers from both the Commerce Department and TSMC and the scope and volume of this disaster. Meanwhile, TSMC's retired founder Morris Chang is lamenting the severe challenges to growth embodied in the export controls. At a TSMC event this weekend, he said, "TSMC is now truly a turf war all major powers want to secure. Free trade of semiconductors, particularly the most advanced semiconductors, has died. In such an environment, our challenge lies in how to continue to drive growth." Interesting stuff, but that is going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief Headlines edition. Next up, the main episode.